Alrighty, so today we jump into the first official episode about an actual topic, not just the intro like last time. So yeah, let's just jump into it and see how it goes. So today you'll see from the title, which is You're Not Behind, You're Just Not Where You Expected to Be. We're going to be talking about a pretty, I think, common feeling that a lot of people, especially in their 20s, and probably 30s feel. I don't know, maybe people in their 50s, if anyone's listening to this, are like, yeah, that feeling kind of never ends. But anyways, I do think that this is a pretty common feeling that you would feel at this stage in life where, yeah, that thought kind of just starts to creep up of like, am I off track? Am I where I should be? Is this the life I envisioned for myself? And yeah, let's talk about it. So I'm just going to talk about my experience with this feeling and what I have kind of tried to learn through it and where I am now with this feeling of sometimes feeling behind. So growing up, I grew up in Texas and I always had this idea of what my life would look like. I would go to college. In Texas, I always wanted to go to Texas A&M, which is where I went to school, and that I would, I don't know, a few years after college, like get married, have kids, settle down, live in Texas, like that broad plan. And that, that there was just a certain rightness to it. It just made sense. It's what I saw a lot of people doing. It's just what I expected would happen. And it was a totally like great plan. And yeah, that's just what I envisioned that my life would look like as I grew older. And as I made that decision right after I graduated college, or a couple months before graduating college, I made the decision to move abroad and teach English. And I was going to be abroad for 2 years and then move back to Texas and like do it right, and like get back onto the track that I said I was going to get on. And so I kind of viewed those initial years of being abroad as like pausing life to a certain degree. It was like this wasn't real life, and it was just like waiting till I got serious as I moved back to Texas. So as I stayed abroad longer and longer, there became moments of this occasional panic of like, oh my gosh, am I behind? What am I doing? I am not doing what I said I would be doing. And of course, this is my version. Like this is very particular to me. But I think most people have a loose plan of what they're doing or where they're headed, even if it's not really detailed like I like to be. But yeah, maybe you thought that like at this point you'd have your dream job, or you'd be out of your hometown, or you'd be settled in a relationship, or you'd have kids, etc. The list goes on of what those expectations might have been. And then you might be looking around and thinking like, wait, this isn't what I pictured. So that's what this episode is for, is this moment where you look around and you think, crap, have I done it right? Is it okay that I am where I am and not where I said I would be? So I just mentioned at the beginning how I did picture that I would be living in Texas, and that's just kind of like the path that I would take. But then even after I made the decision to move abroad, I shifted my plans slightly, but I still really compartmentalized them. So, for example, whenever I first made that decision, I remember having a conversation with my parents and before I moved and saying like, how long is it reasonable for me to be abroad? And as I said at the beginning, like I kind of viewed it as like waiting to get serious about life and getting serious about like those next plans for me. And so I just was like kind of trying to compartmentalize and rationalize those years abroad and like what makes sense. And I think also just when you're in high school and college and life is like really set up in these blocks of a specific amount of months, right? You have your fall semester, and then you have Christmas break and spring semester and summer, and then it's like rinse and repeat for almost your whole life, right? Up until you're graduated from college. And so for me, once I made that decision of like, I'm going to move abroad, I think putting those like time limits. So what I ended up deciding in terms of the number of years was I would do 1 year in Europe and then 1 year in South Korea. And then I was going to move back to Texas. So that was more or less my plan. And I think putting those caps on like the 1 year just kind of made that open-endedness of life more manageable for me. Because to me, just to like enter the real world is quite daunting, because it's just like, now it's the rest of your life. Good luck. So for me, I think I just made those timelines to help me digest the open-endedness of what adulthood was going to be. So that was definitely good to a certain degree. I think it gave me some really good structure. But then what ended up happening is that I had kind of set these expectations for myself, very much based on timeline and kind of tied to success as well. And then by the time that I got to my 1 year in Prague and I didn't leave and I was still there, it was hard for me to stay and not feel like I was just like falling behind, because I had set up these expectations for myself and I wasn't following them. And I don't think that like it wasn't unreasonable to want to stay at that time. I was falling in love at that time. I was really enjoying my life there. And also that very first year that I spent in Prague, I moved there in January of 2020. So 2020, COVID, a lot of my first year just was not the year that I had envisioned in terms of getting to do the amount of traveling I wanted to do and having the experiences I wanted. So all that being said, I decided to stay. And then I had in the back of my mind, though, like, oh, I'm like postponing my plan. Like, what about my plan, though? What about that 1 year mark? And so staying, like, actually was a little bit stressful, because I felt like I was going against, like, the standard I had expected for myself. And just to kind of bring this back, like, I know that this is a very dramatic shift of, like, across the ocean. And maybe if you're not doing that same thing, like, this is totally unrelatable. But I do think that a change in career or a breakup or watching your friend group change, like, all of these can still stir up those same feelings of, am I behind? Am I headed where I should be headed? You know, is this good where I am? So all of that being said, I didn't really gracefully embrace where I was headed. I feel like there was a lot of tension with trying to live in the moment, because in the back of my mind, I was very self-aware and aware of the fact that I wasn't doing what I said I would do. And, you know, looking back now, it's like, that's really dramatic. Like, I don't know why I set up such expectations for myself and then got so stressed when I didn't follow them. But I think that's common. I think that it's easy to fall into that trap of just feeling like, you know, this pressure of needing to like either catch up or chase something different than you're doing right now. I also feel like I wasn't fully grasping at the time that like I was feeling this way. I think like looking back, it's really easy for me to view that time and be like, oh my gosh, girl, you should have breathed, you know, you should have enjoyed where you were. And I did, but you know, like I know that there was definitely a level of baseline like stress of like, what's my plan, where am I going, and why am I still here? But yeah, in the moment itself, I don't know that I was fully aware of the fact that I was quite stressed about that, which I think is quite interesting. But I do think that I kind of became more aware of that over time as I went to therapy. And there was a very specific moment in therapy where I think it was kind of like that reframing moment for me, or the turning point. And that's when I was talking to, okay, this wasn't even long ago. So this is like a year ago maybe. Because yeah, at that point we had moved to Finland. So I think I maybe touched on this in the first episode, but just to kind of recap again, is that I moved to Prague in January 2020, lived there for 3.5 years, and now have been in Finland for the last 2 years, which is where my husband is from. So yeah, I was in Finland at the time having this conversation with my therapist and saying like, I don't know, it's just like spiraling that day and having a moment. It was probably a dark winter day, if I were to guess. but having a moment where I was just explaining to her, like, oh my gosh, what would happen? Can you even imagine if I was still living here in 10 years? Like, what if I get stuck? And I use that phrase, get stuck. What if I get stuck here? Can you imagine if I get stuck here and if I end up here? And like, kind of just like, word vomiting. And she stopped me and she was like, what if you're not stuck at that point? What if you chose it? Like, and I know that might seem really stupid, or like obvious, but I think it's really easy to fall into this mindset of like, what if where I'm going is not where I want to be, and I end up in this like you start catastrophizing. I love that word. You start catastrophizing about like where you're headed and like how you might feel at that point. And she just like stopped me in my tracks and was like, what if you choose to be there? What if that was your decision? And do you trust yourself that if you are there in 10 years, it's because you're happy to be there and you made the decision to be there. Someone didn't force you to be there. There's nothing like forcing you to stay there. If you're there, it's because that's where you should be. And I think this just made me pause and be like, oh wait, you're right. Like I am not going to go somewhere. I'm not going to head somewhere in my life where I'm miserable. I'm not going to be choosing something for me and for my husband and our family that like we don't want. Whatever I'm doing, wherever I end up, it's because that's what's right for us. And I think I've just maybe kind of like jumped timelines here a bit. I was just talking about like that first year in Prague, which was 5 years ago, and then now having that conversation with my therapist a year ago. So definitely within those years, there was moments where I was also going to therapy and there was a little bit of realization of like, oh, I'm panicking because things aren't going like I expected. Oh gosh, this could be a whole episode about how when I was dating my husband, and there was a lot of stress for me because I was really worried about like where we were headed. I was very, very, very aware of the fact that he's Finnish and I'm American, and my plan is to go back to Texas, or was/is, I don't know, and what that would mean for us. And so I was, within these years, there was definitely moments of like self-awareness of like, oh, I am panicking about plans. I'm a very planny person, in case you didn't catch on. But anyway, so yeah, this moment, I think especially whenever I started questioning like, what if I'm stuck in Finland, and where my therapist just like stopped me and was like, wait, but like if you are, that's because you chose it. That was a really like important moment, I think, for me to also just realize like how much like we are so privileged to have that much, I feel like, control over that, like choosing in our life. We get to choose where we're going to be, and we get to choose when we're going to be where we're going to be for the most part. There are visas involved, which is not, that's not always simple. But anyways, point being that just having her voice that and like say that back to me, it was a really good moment of like, whew, okay, breathe. Like, and I will just point this out as well, because I think it's important for me to remind myself that I also, with the whole question of like, will I be stuck in Finland? I felt the same about Prague. So at the beginning, I really struggled that first year there because of multiple reasons, but like COVID and seasonal depression, and there was a lot of amazing things, but there was also a lot of stuff that made it quite tough. And at one point, if you would have told me I wanted to live in Prague for so many more years than I got to, like I would not have believed you. And so when I am having this catastrophizing moment with my therapist, I'm like, what if I stay in Finland forever? Like, my gosh, things change. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind. And especially like how she just pointed out, like if you're going to be there in 10 years, it's not because like you're struggling to be there. Well, gosh, I hope not. But I think a lot of this just comes down to trying and like attempting to trust myself, and that we're going to make the decisions that make sense for us with the information that we have at that time. I really do want to touch on this, but I also just wanted to mention as well, like I am a Christian, so I do also have a certain level. I have faith in the plan of my life. I do struggle very much with the practicality of not wanting to control it so much. But I think all of this being said, I do have a certain level of peace of, trust that God is taking me where I need to be in my life. But just getting back to then like, how do I actually live that out? I think it's really easy to get in my head of like, how do I practically do that? How do I know where I need to be at that time? And I think it all just comes back to what my therapist was saying of like, breathe, slow down. If you're headed somewhere, if you're making decisions for yourself today, like you're doing it based off a certain set of information. So like going back to my year plans that I had set out for myself, I don't think there was anything wrong with the fact that I made my 1 year little plan of Prague and then my 1 year plan of South Korea and then back to Texas. Like that makes life manageable for me. It helps me to a certain degree. I think what needs to change then is being able to let go when things start to go a little bit differently and being like, oh wow, like I'm noticing that they're going differently. Like instead of panicking, trusting that they're going differently and that's okay. And there's a reason why it's going differently and we can adjust. We can breathe and we can live where we're headed. And yeah, what I was saying on the point of you make decisions for yourself based off of the information that you have. So back then when I was about to graduate college and I had my 1 year plan and back to Texas, like that made total sense. I think it made a lot of sense to do that. Like I would give that advice to anyone. Yeah, great. Go abroad, be there for a while, figure things out, come home. That's a perfectly acceptable and great plan. But as life progressed and as I lived life and I experienced life and as I was falling in love and as I was just, shifting and moving and living, things changed and I made different decisions with that different set of information. So when I was, having that conversation back in late 2019 about how long and my timelines and all of that, I wasn't falling in love at that time. I wasn't dating Marcus. I wasn't loving life in Prague. I wasn't thriving. I wasn't in the moment. And so as life shifts, you make different decisions based on the set of criteria, based on the set of information that you're living, breathing, existing within. And so to have someone just like stop you in your tracks and be like, whoa, like, let's stop freaking out. Let me go back to the beginning of like, maybe you thought you'd have your dream job or be out of your hometown or finally be settled in a relationship or have a family, whatever those things might be, like where you thought you would be, what was going on in your life at that time where you had those expectations and what's going on now? And do you trust that you're headed in a good direction with the cards that have been dealt for you right now? Like, are you happy with that? I think it's for me, I love, I don't know how many times I can say the same word timelines within one episode, so sorry, but like I love timelines. And so I think it's like, for me specifically, learning how to try to let go of expectations for myself built based off of timelines and life stages. I think it's more attempting to live with like confidence and trust that you have ownership over the decisions that you're making and you're headed in a way, and like you're headed in life in a way that you're proud of, that you live off of your moral compass, you're kind to other people, you are loved, you're loving, etc. So trying to build success based more off of a set of principles rather than accomplishments by a certain point in time, because that can, I think, so easily lead into this whole idea of feeling behind. And I do want to preface all of this with saying, like, I don't just think that means like drop everything and live with no real intention and without goals and dreams. I think you can have all of those things, and I do think you should very much live with like zest and dreams and goals, but just being careful about how you frame those and how you frame what success is for yourself as you try to achieve those things. Now, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense for everyone here, like listening, but for me at least, that's what I keep trying to come back to. Just more about values and alignment and trusting that I'm headed where I'm headed, and I have confidence in that. But whatever your version of this isn't what I expected looks like, I just think it's really important to just remind yourself that you're not late, you're not behind, you're just living, you're just here, and that's allowed to just experience what you're experiencing in the moment, even if it's not what you expected. So yeah, I don't think that this is like the solution of everything. Just shift your mindset, but it is definitely something that helps me, or is I still get this feeling and I still struggle with this, but I'm trying to catastrophize less about this particular point in life. And for me, this has been something that has just helped with that particular feeling. And I hope that it's resonated with someone else. So if it has, I would love if you would DM me and let me know. My Instagram handle is in the show notes. And so would love to hear from you guys, or in the comments or anything like that. But yeah, that was fun. I am glad I got first episode, like real content wise, done. I am very excited because I'm just supposed to be posting and releasing everything in just a few days. So after that, it's kind of go time on now that I'm here, and that's fun and crazy and exciting. And I hope that other people out there are excited as well and ready to join me. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today, and see you in just another week, where we are going to be talking about, at that time, life abroad and some things that no one tells you about it.